Today we're going to talk about how to install container labs and start Arista CEOS container devices or container compatible devices on a container lab. Now the first requirement is how do I install container labs on an Ubuntu machine. So here on the screen you can see the container lab documentation that talks about installation. Under installation, you can see that it is clearly detailing the commands that is required to install container labs on an Ubuntu machine and the different types of container images that are compatible. So for this example, we are going to deploy an Arista container compatible EOS image. Now this container compatible Arista EOS image can be downloaded from the Arista website. You can pick whatever container version of Arista EOS that you want, and you will have to upload it onto the Ubuntu machine on which you're going to install container labs and boot up this Arista CEOS. Now you can see that the script has been tested on the following versions of Ubuntu and the commands are pretty detailed in this documentation. So let me quickly jump into the setup that I have. So I have loaded an Ubuntu virtual machine in the Azure cloud, and you can see that I have a pretty limited number of resources allocated because for container based EEOS you don't really need a heavy loaded system from what I have seen. So I have two virtual CPUs and a 8 gig memory, and I'm just showing you that this is based on an Ubuntu machine. So let me quickly log into this machine so you can see it's Ubuntu 20.4. So this is the machine that I have here. I've created a folder called CLABS-Demo. Inside that folder, the first thing that I've done is I've downloaded the Arista compatible CEOS image and I have uploaded it onto the server, the Ubuntu server. So the key part is you will have to download this particular image from the Arista website after you register. So let me explain the steps that I'm going to do. So first, I just am demonstrating that this Ubuntu machine in the Azure cloud just has a single IP address interface. So in terms of installation, there are pretty easy steps. These steps are based on that documentation that I had shown earlier. So I'm just going to use that command that is explained in that documentation and start installing the Docker and the supporting packages that is required for container labs to work on Ubuntu. I'm just waiting for the command to complete. We'll just give it a few more minutes. It's got to do a few steps here, as you can see on the screen. So it's just finishing off that installation process right now. So as soon as it finishes installation, we'll have to do a few steps that we will talk about. So now the installation is done. You may see certain errors that are popping up. We don't have to worry about it. So the key part is after you've installed, you'll have to modify this particular permissions for the user. In my case, my username is displayed here. So I'm just trying to associate my username to this particular group, CLAB admins. So that is the next step as it's clearly mentioned in the documentation. And this step is also mentioned on the documentation for container labs on installation as well. Now, the next thing I do is I make sure that my Ubuntu is up to date because this is a brand new Ubuntu that I have just loaded onto the Azure cloud. So all my packages on Ubuntu are up to date. So then I create a new group called Docker, which will be the step 4. So now let's check if the Docker version is correctly installed based on that single command. So I can see that my Docker is now installed. So it's pretty simple. All I've done is just use this one command and it installs all the dependencies and everything. Now after that, I've checked my Docker version, and then I'm going to check if I have a Docker compatible image, which is what will be used by container labs. I take Docker images, you can see that there is no images available right now because we'll have to build an image based on the EEOS that we have downloaded, the CEOS. So how do I do it? So there are some examples that will talk about importing the config file. I really don't want to talk about this at this point in time. The reason is, in this demonstration we are talking about deploying a Arista boxes. This reference file is a YAML file that you can download. This step is also available on the Container Lab installation step, but this will focus predominantly on running a Nokia and an Arista back to back. But let me just go to the most important step of creating an Arista compatible image. So the first thing you have to do is, as we know from this example here, I have the image already loaded onto my Ubuntu machine. I have to run this one particular command. So what it is doing is importing the container based EOS into this particular formatted version. So I know that the version is available here. You can see it's kept in this folder. So I'm running this command from the same folder. So it will now try to import and create a compatible Docker image for Arista container EOS. So once this is done, then we will be able to start the YAML file and create a back-to-back topology with the Arista boxes. So after this step is done, I'm just waiting for it to complete. It might take a few minutes. What I typically expect is, once this is done, when you run Docker images, you should see your compatible image listed here. Now this is what will be called in the YAML file when I do container lab deploy command. So I have a sample file also. I will walk through what the sample file that I have, and then we can see exactly what is happening. So as I was mentioning, it just takes a few more minutes to get this done. So we'll have to just wait for that to complete. So here I have a lot of samples that I was testing, and there are wonderful references available on GitHub as well. A lot of community forums and GitHubs that talk about how to import container lab based topologies. So I've been playing with that for quite some time and created different topologies. So that's exactly what you're seeing on the screen here. So there's already another video I posted on the channel about how to create a virtual Junos router using container labs. You can refer to that video as well. That explains how you can create quickly a Juniper router to be loaded from the container lab, and then you can use it to create your own topologies. So here the command is done. It's imported the container image. Now if I check Docker image, you see Docker images, that's the command, and you can see that the image is ready for loading. So the sample file that I have here is CEOS YAML file. Now the topology documentation is pretty much referring to the public documentation. Of course, you can refer to this documentation for all details about installation, which is what I had shown earlier as well. So the container labs, which has got quick start steps, installation, and all details. But let me go back to my topology file, which is what is mostly important here in this video. So the YAML file that I have here is trying to create two nodes. The first node is called CEOS1. The second node is called CEOS2. The kind, you have to define it as per the syntax. In this case, it's an Arista container EOS. And the version, this is the image, because when you ran Docker image, this is the image that I'm referencing. I call the image repository name followed by a colon and the version, or the tag that you see here. And the key part is, I want to connect these two devices back to back using Ethernet 1. So CEOS1 device will have Ethernet 1 connected to CEOS2 on Ethernet 1 again. So to deploy the topology or to boot it up, the command is container lab deploy -p, and you call your file. Now what this should do is, it should try to boot up the container images based Arista. Let's check if they're coming up. So it might just take a few minutes before it starts showing up that the devices are running. You can see it's creating a link as well between the two Arista boxes. So now as you see that we waited for a few minutes and it deployed the two Arista devices, and it's also giving us the details of the nodes, the name of the nodes. So now I am also checking the IF config on my Ubuntu machine. Previously, before installing the Docker and the compatible versions, you know that I just had only one Ethernet 0 interface. But now you can see that the Docker is creating subnets and a bridge interface, which is what is used to create allocate IP addresses for the devices. So these IP addresses are allocated based on your bridge interfaces that are installed as a part of your installation process. Just for reference, you can see the subnet here. Now let me quickly try to log into these devices. The default password for Arista devices is admin and admin. So you can use the IP address to log in. So you can see that's asking me for a prompt, and I am right now logged into the Arista device. So if I do show interface, IP interface brief, there's only management here. So we may have to just give it a few more seconds for it to come up. So let me also check if I can log into the second Arista device. Again, username password is admin. Now when I check the running configs, you can see that it really doesn't have anything, just the standard stuff. So show interface counters. So Ethernet 1 is there. So this is the one interface, as you know, that we have allocated or connected this interface to the other Arista. So you can see that particular interface is up in addition to the management interface, which has got the IP address. So let's quickly configure this interface and try to see if they both can communicate. So I'm on Arista 2. So what I'm going to do is config interface ET1 no switch port IP address. I'll call it 1.1.2/30. This is just the IP address I've allocated for this interface. I'm just writing or saving the configuration on Arista. So now let me log into the other Arista device. Going into enable mode, show interface. You should see the same two interfaces. One is the management, the other one is the ET. And you can see it's currently up because it's connected to the other Arista. So going into the config mode, interface ET1 no switch port IP address, I'm going to just give the other end of the IP, which is 1.1.1.1/30. Now then you just come out and let's check if I can ping the far end device. Now you can see that I can ping the far end device. So right now two Arista devices are connected back to back, which you can obviously expand and create different topologies with the same logic. So I can even try to connect to the other Arista. You can see. So from Arista CEOS1, I'm able to connect to CEOS2. So pretty handy to quickly create topologies based on your requirements, whether it is for study purposes or whether even if you're doing some design and you want to validate your concepts, you can pretty much enhance these labs. There are a lot of examples available also on the public forums about different topologies you can create. So this is a very basic YAML file that is just creating two Aristas back to back. Of course, you can expand it, create more endpoints, and create more devices as per your topology requirements. Hope you find this useful. Bye for now.